What kind of person are you when no one's watching? When an elderly man stood confused on campus, dozens walked past without a second glance. Not our problem, a student remarked coldly. But Marcus Johnson, despite his own painful injury, made a different choice. "Excuse me, sir," he said gently. "You seem like you might be looking for something. Can I help you find your way?" Little did he know this simple act of kindness would expose campus-wide discrimination and open doors he never thought possible. Who was this lost old man, and why did his identity leave university administrators trembling? Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson winced as he adjusted his backpack, the sharp pain in his lower back a constant reminder of that day 3 weeks ago. The university's brick pathways seemed endless as he made his way to his afternoon class, each step a deliberate effort. "Need some help there, Johnson?" a passing classmate called out, not bothering to slow down. "I'm good," Marcus replied automatically, though he was anything but. The memory of what had happened in Professor Blake's advanced economics seminar remained fresh, haunting him like a shadow. It had been a typical Thursday afternoon. Marcus had arrived early, as always, carefully selecting a seat near the front. Being one of only 3 black students in a class of 35, he felt constant pressure to prove himself worthy of his scholarship. When Professor Karen Blake entered, her disapproving gaze had immediately fallen on him. "Mr. Johnson, that seat is reserved for graduate assistants," she had announced loudly, though Marcus had sat there for weeks without issue. "I'm sorry, Professor, but there's no sign indicating. Are you questioning me?" Professor Blake's voice had cut through the settling classroom silence. "Move to the back. Now." Marcus had gathered his belongings, the weight of stairs following him. The only available seat had been a broken chair with an unstable back support. When he'd hesitantly pointed this out, Professor Blake's response had been immediate and humiliating. "If you don't want the chair, you're welcome to stand or leave. Your choice, Mr. Johnson." He'd chosen the chair. Halfway through the lecture, when he'd shifted to take notes, the chair had collapsed completely. Marcus had fallen backward, his spine hitting the sharp edge of the desk behind him with shocking force. The entire class had erupted in laughter. Professor Blake had merely raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps next time you'll arrive early enough to secure proper seating." 3 weeks of physical therapy later, the university had done nothing about his formal complaint. Professor Blake had claimed it was an unfortunate accident, and the administration seemed content with that explanation. Now, Marcus moved carefully across campus, determination in every painful step. Despite everything, he would not let them win. His mother hadn't raised him to quit, no matter how unfair the circumstances. He'd earned his place here, and he would graduate, with honors, even if it meant enduring professors like Karen Blake. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother: "Remember who you are, what you're capable of. Don't let them define your worth." Marcus straightened his shoulders despite the pain. Today was just another day to prove them wrong. The central plaza buzzed with activity as students rushed between afternoon classes. The spring weather had drawn everyone outdoors, filling benches and grassy patches with study groups and casual conversations. Marcus paused near the fountain, needing a moment to readjust his backpack and manage the persistent ache in his spine. That's when he noticed him, an elderly man standing at the edge of the plaza, looking completely lost. His silver hair caught the sunlight, and despite his well-tailored suit, there was vulnerability in his stance. The man kept glancing at a small piece of paper, then at the buildings surrounding the plaza, clearly disoriented. What struck Marcus most wasn't the man's confusion but how systematically everyone ignored him. A group of students from the business school, recognizable by their matching blazers, walked right past, one of them nearly colliding with the elderly gentleman without offering so much as an "excuse me." Professor Donaldson from the English department, who prided himself on teaching ethics and literature, was deeply engaged with his phone as he sidestepped the old man without a glance. Even more disturbing was watching Dean Harmon, head of student services, whose entire job centered on providing assistance, hurried past with her eyes deliberately averted when the elderly man attempted to get her attention. "Excuse me," Marcus heard the man say to a passing student wearing expensive headphones, "could you direct me to?" The student increased his volume without breaking stride. Marcus felt a familiar twist in his gut, the same feeling he experienced whenever he witnessed casual cruelty masked as indifference. He'd been on the receiving end often enough to recognize it instantly. "Not our problem," remarked a student lounging nearby to her friend. "Security should handle these random old people wandering onto campus." Marcus watched as two campus tour guides leading prospective students carefully navigated around the elderly man, as if his presence might somehow tarnish the university's perfect image. The hypocrisy was striking. This was the same institution that plastered its marketing materials with words like community, compassion, and character. The same university whose orientation speech emphasized helping others and demonstrating leadership. Yet here was someone clearly in need, being systematically ignored by everyone who represented the institution. The elderly man's shoulders slumped slightly as another person brushed past him. He looked down at his paper again, squinting through reading glasses that sat low on his nose. Marcus's back throbbed as he shifted his weight. He should keep moving, he had a study group waiting, and standing too long always worsened his pain. After what Professor Blake had done, he promised himself to focus solely on his studies and avoid any potential complications. Getting involved wasn't the smart play. Not here. Not at an institution that had already shown how it valued, or rather, didn't value, students like him. Yet as the elderly man's gaze swept the plaza once more, looking for anyone willing to acknowledge his existence, Marcus found he couldn't just walk away. Some principles mattered more than personal comfort or strategic invisibility. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, "Your character is defined by what you do when it costs you something." Marcus took a deep breath and began making his way across the plaza, each step sending ripples of pain up his spine. "Marcus, are you serious right now?" Sophia Williams intercepted him halfway across the plaza, her expression incredulous. "We've been waiting for you at the library for 20 minutes. "I know, I'm sorry," Marcus said, his eyes still tracking the elderly man who had now moved to the edge of a planter, looking increasingly frustrated. "I just need to help that man first. He's been trying to get directions for at least 10 minutes, and everyone's just ignoring him." Sophia followed his gaze and frowned. "Look, I get it, but we have the econ project due tomorrow, and you know how Professor Blake already has it out for you. Is this really the time to play campus guide?" Marcus understood her concern. After the incident in Blake's class, he couldn't afford any more negative attention. His scholarship review was coming up, and his academic standing needed to be impeccable. But something about the systematic indifference toward the old man struck a deeper chord. "It'll just take a few minutes," Marcus insisted. "You guys can start without me." "Your back is already killing you," Sophia reminded him. "I can see it in how you're standing. And now you want to wander around campus with some random person who probably got separated from a campus tour." Two students walking by overheard their conversation. One of them snickered and muttered, always trying to be the hero, just loud enough to be heard. Marcus felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. This was exactly why he needed to help, because too many people found it easier to mock than to show basic human decency. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he told Sophia firmly. "Some things are more important than a project grade." Sophia's expression softened. "That's why we're friends, Johnson. Your priorities are weird, but your heart's in the right place." She sighed dramatically. "Text me if you need backup. And don't be too long, I'm not explaining quadratic functions to Derek again without reinforcements." As she headed toward the library, Marcus carefully made his way to where the elderly man now sat, massaging his temples. Up close, Marcus noticed the fine quality of the man's suit and the distinguished lines of his face. Despite his apparent confusion, there was an aura of dignity about him. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said gently. "You seem like you might be looking for something. Can I help you find your way?" The man looked up, surprise and relief washing over his features. "Young man, I would be most grateful." His voice carried a quiet authority. I'm trying to locate Baldwin Hall. I have a meeting there at 3 o'clock, and I seem to have taken a wrong turn somewhere. Baldwin Hall is on the other side of campus, Marcus explained. It's not the easiest building to find, even for those of us who've been here a while. I was given directions, but... The man gestured to the note in his hand. My eyesight isn't what it once was, and this map they provided is rather small. Marcus glanced at his watch. It was already 2:30 p.m. Baldwin's about a 15-minute walk from here, sir. Would you like me to show you the way? The elderly man studied Marcus for a moment, his eyes keen despite his earlier confusion. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. You appear to be in some discomfort yourself. Marcus was surprised by the observation. Most people didn't notice, or didn't care to notice, his careful movements. Old football injury, Marcus offered, the familiar half-truth easier than the full story. Nothing serious. I'm Marcus Johnson, by the way. William Evans, the man replied, extending his hand. Dr. William Evans. And I would greatly appreciate your assistance, Mr. Johnson, if you're certain it's no trouble. As they shook hands, Marcus felt a strange sense that this simple act of decency might matter more than he realized. He'd made his decision, his study group would have to wait. It's no trouble at all, Dr. Evans. Baldwin Hall is this way. Marcus gestured toward the west path. We should get going if you want to make your 3 o'clock meeting. As they began walking, Marcus couldn't help but notice how several passers-by suddenly seemed interested in the elderly man now that he wasn't alone, their expressions curious and sometimes suspiciously watchful. It was as if Dr. Evans had only become visible when someone else acknowledged his existence first. Tell me about yourself, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Evans said as they navigated the pathway. What are you studying here? And with that simple question, a conversation began that would change the course of both their lives. They had barely made it halfway across the quad when a campus security guard approached them, his expression stern beneath the brim of his uniform cap. Marcus recognized him, James Richards, notorious among students of color for his random ID checks that somehow never seemed random at all. Excuse me, Richards called out, his hand resting meaningfully on his belt. I need to speak with you for a moment. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest but kept his expression neutral. Is there a problem, Officer Richards? The guard's eyes narrowed at the recognition. We received a call about someone harassing an elderly visitor. His gaze shifted between Marcus and Dr. Evans, making it clear who he assumed the harasser was. There must be some misunderstanding, Marcus began carefully. I'm just helping Dr. Evans find Baldwin Hall for his 3 o'clock meeting. Richards ignored him, turning to address Dr. Evans directly. Sir, is this young man bothering you? Do you need assistance? Before Dr. Evans could answer, a small crowd began to gather. Marcus recognized several faces, students who had earlier walked past Dr. Evans without a second glance, now suddenly interested in the unfolding drama. This student has been nothing but helpful, Dr. Evans stated firmly. In fact, he's the only person who bothered to assist me after I spent considerable time trying to get directions. Richards looked unconvinced. I'll need to see some ID from both of you. Marcus carefully shifted his weight to reach for his wallet, unable to hide a wince as pain shot through his lower back. Is that really necessary? Dr. Evans asked, his voice carrying a sudden edge of authority. We're simply trying to reach Baldwin Hall for an appointment that's growing increasingly urgent. Standard procedure, Richards insisted, his attention fixed on Marcus. Especially when we receive reports of suspicious activity. From the gathering crowd, Sophia pushed forward. What suspicious activity? I've been watching them walk and talk. Since when is that suspicious? Richards frowned at the interruption. This doesn't concern you, miss. Actually, it does, Sophia countered, positioning herself beside Marcus. Since I'm heading to Baldwin Hall myself and can vouch that my friend Marcus was simply giving directions to Dr. Evans here when you interrupted them. The tension in the air was palpable. Marcus maintained his composure, though his back pain intensified with stress. He'd been in similar situations before, moments where ordinary activities became suspect based solely on who was performing them. Dr. Evans studied Richards with increasing interest, as if making mental notes about the interaction. "Young man," he addressed the security guard with surprising calm, "I understand you're doing your job, but I'm already late for an important meeting. Now, either you can continue to delay us with this unnecessary questioning, or you can perhaps assist us in reaching Baldwin Hall more quickly." Richards seemed caught off guard by the elderly man's commanding tone. He hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside. "I'll escort you myself." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Evans replied firmly. "Mr. Johnson is doing an excellent job. Though I would appreciate knowing who reported this suspicious activity so I might address it with the appropriate authorities later." The security guard's expression flickered with uncertainty. "The caller remained anonymous, sir." "How convenient," Sophia muttered, just loud enough to be heard. As they resumed their journey, the crowd slowly dispersed, though several students remained watching from a distance. Marcus could feel their stares but focused instead on maintaining a steady pace despite his increasing discomfort. "Are you all right, Mr. Johnson?" Dr. Evans asked quietly when they were out of earshot. "Yes, sir. I'm used to it." "Used to it," Dr. Evans repeated thoughtfully. "That's rather telling, isn't it?" The incident had cost them valuable time. As they approached the campus center, Marcus checked his watch again. "We'll need to take a shortcut through the Humanities building if you want to make your meeting on time." "Lead the way," Dr. Evans said, his keen eyes still studying Marcus with growing interest. "And perhaps you can tell me more about being used to it as we walk." The Humanities building provided a temporary respite from the spring sunshine and curious onlookers. As they walked through the quieter hallway, Marcus found himself speaking more openly than he had intended. "It's just part of campus life for some of us," he explained, carefully navigating around a group of students clustered near the bulletin board. "You learn to expect certain things, extra security checks, people assuming you're lost or don't belong in certain spaces, professors who seem surprised when you know the answers." Dr. Evans listened attentively. "And you accept this as normal?" "Not normal," Marcus clarified. "Just reality. My mother always says, know the playing field, then play better than anyone else. So that's what I do." They paused at an intersection of hallways, and Marcus pointed to the right. "This way is faster, but there are stairs. Would you prefer the elevator?" "The stairs are fine," Dr. Evans assured him. "Please, continue with what you were saying. It's quite illuminating." As they began descending the staircase, Marcus gripped the handrail tightly, managing each step with careful deliberation to minimize the pain in his back. "You mentioned earlier that your injury was from football," Dr. Evans observed. "Yet you navigate these stairs like someone with a more recent injury." Marcus hesitated, then decided on honesty. "It wasn't football. That's just easier to explain than the truth." "And what is the truth, if you don't mind my asking?" 3 weeks ago, a professor," Marcus began, but was interrupted as 2 students passed them on the stairs. "Brownnoser," one muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow but said nothing until they had reached the bottom of the staircase. "Does that happen often?" "Often enough," Marcus acknowledged. "Some people think the only way I could be here is through special treatment or lowered standards." "And why do you suppose they think that?" Marcus gave him a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. "Sir, with all due respect, I think you know why." Dr. Evans nodded slowly. "Indeed. And this professor you were about to mention?" As they continued walking, Marcus explained the incident with Professor Blake, the forced move to the broken chair, the subsequent fall, and the administration's dismissal of his complaint. "That's unconscionable," Dr. Evans said quietly when Marcus finished. "Have you sought medical attention?" "Physical therapy twice a week," Marcus confirmed. "My scholarship doesn't cover it, but my mother insisted." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She is. Single parent, working 2 jobs while getting her nursing degree. Everything I know about perseverance, I learned from her. They emerged from the humanities building into sunlight again. Baldwin Hall stood just ahead, its imposing neoclassical columns a stark contrast to the more modern buildings surrounding it. "We're almost there," Marcus said, checking the time. 10 minutes to spare. Dr. Evans slowed his pace. "Tell me, Mr. Johnson, what is it you're studying?" "Economics with a minor in public policy. I want to work on economic development in underserved communities." "An admirable goal," Dr. Evans commented. "And despite these obstacles, you've persisted." "I don't really have a choice," Marcus replied honestly. "Too many people are counting on me to succeed." They stopped at the foot of Baldwin Hall's wide steps. Dr. Evans turned to face Marcus directly, studying him with an intensity that was somehow both disconcerting and affirming. "Mr. Johnson, I believe choices define us, particularly the ones we make when no one is watching, or when making the right choice comes at a personal cost." He extended his hand. "Thank you for your assistance today. It has been most illuminating." As they shook hands, Marcus couldn't help but feel there was something more to Dr. Evans than a simple visitor who had lost his way. "Good luck with your meeting, sir." "I think," Dr. Evans said thoughtfully, "that luck will have very little to do with what happens next. Would you mind waiting for me? I'd like to continue our conversation after my meeting." Marcus sat on the steps of Baldwin Hall, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate his back. He'd texted Sophia to let her know he'd be late to their study session. Her response had been predictably dramatic: the mysterious old man better be worth failing Blake's assignment. He was beginning to wonder if she might be right when the massive oak doors opened and Dr. Evans emerged, accompanied by Professor Blake herself. Marcus straightened immediately, an instinctive response to her presence. "Mr. Johnson," Professor Blake's tone carried unmistakable displeasure. "I was unaware you were acquainted with Dr. Evans." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Evans interjected smoothly, "Mr. Johnson was kind enough to escort me across campus when everyone else seemed too preoccupied to assist an old man. Quite fortuitous, as it's given us the opportunity for a fascinating discussion about campus culture." Professor Blake's expression tightened. "I see. Well, I'm sure Mr. Johnson needs to return to his studies now. I'd be happy to show you to your next appointment myself." "Actually," Dr. Evans replied, "I've asked Mr. Johnson to accompany me. We have unfinished business to discuss." The professor's smile became strained. "With all due respect, Dr. Evans, there's an important faculty reception starting soon at Winthrop Hall that you wouldn't want to miss. Perhaps Mr. Johnson could join us there. Though it is typically limited to faculty and distinguished guests." The subtle exclusion wasn't lost on either man. Marcus began to politely excuse himself, but Dr. Evans placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Johnson goes where I go this afternoon, Professor Blake. I insist." The walk to Winthrop Hall was tense, with Professor Blake attempting to monopolize Dr. Evans's attention while subtly maneuvering to keep Marcus a step behind them. The professor's running commentary about the university's prestigious history and accomplished faculty was interrupted only by pointed references to Marcus's unique status at the university. "Our scholarship students add such diversity to our campus," she remarked at one point, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dr. Evans merely nodded, occasionally glancing back to ensure Marcus was still with them. "Mr. Johnson was telling me about his economics studies earlier. He has quite impressive insights on community development models." Professor Blake's laugh was brittle. "How charming. Though I must say, Mr. Johnson sometimes struggles with the more rigorous analytical aspects in my advanced economics seminar. Don't you, Mr. Johnson?" "I manage, Professor," Marcus replied evenly. "Yes, you certainly do. Though I still believe some students would benefit from starting with more foundational courses." As they passed the Science Center, they encountered Dean Patricia Morrison, who immediately brightened at the sight of Professor Blake and Dr. Evans. "Karen. I see you found our distinguished visitor." She extended her hand to Dr. Evans. "Dr. Evans, we're so honored to have you on campus today." Dean Morrison then noticed Marcus and her smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Johnson. Shouldn't you be at the library? I believe midterms are approaching." "Mr. Johnson is accompanying me at my request," Dr. Evans stated firmly before Marcus could respond. The dean's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, how unexpected." "Indeed," Dr. Evans agreed. "I've found unexpected encounters often yield the most valuable insights." They continued toward Winthrop Hall, with Dean Morrison joining their procession. Marcus observed how the dynamics shifted around them. Students who normally ignored him now stared with curious expressions, staff members who typically looked through him suddenly nodded in recognition. It was as if his proximity to Dr. Evans had magically transformed him from invisible to worthy of notice. "Dr. Evans," Dean Morrison said as they approached the grand building, "I understand you're here for a comprehensive evaluation. I do hope you've been shown the best of what our institution has to offer." "I've certainly been shown what this institution has to offer," Dr. Evans replied neutrally. "Mr. Johnson has been particularly illuminating about the student experience." The dean and professor exchanged a quick glance. "Well," Professor Blake interjected, "Mr. Johnson's experience is hardly representative. As a scholarship student, his perspective is quite specific." "And what perspective would that be, Professor?" Dr. Evans asked, his tone deceptively mild. Before she could answer, they reached Winthrop Hall's entrance where faculty members in formal attire were gathering for what appeared to be a significant event. Several turned to stare as Marcus approached alongside Dr. Evans. "Perhaps," Dean Morrison suggested delicately, "Mr. Johnson would be more comfortable waiting elsewhere. This is a rather exclusive gathering, and we wouldn't want him to feel out of place." Dr. Evans stopped walking and turned to face both women directly. "I find it interesting that you're so concerned about Mr. Johnson's comfort now, when you showed no such concern for mine earlier today as I stood lost in your central plaza." The dean's expression froze. "I'm sorry." "Oh yes," Dr. Evans continued pleasantly. "We saw each other quite clearly, Dean Morrison. You were quite determined not to make eye contact when I attempted to ask for directions. Fascinating behavior from someone whose title suggests a commitment to student services." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Marcus shifted his weight, wincing slightly as his back protested. "Are you in pain, Mr. Johnson?" Dr. Evans asked with genuine concern. "I'm fine, sir." "He is not fine," Dr. Evans addressed the two administrators. "And I believe we're about to discover exactly why that is the case, aren't we, Professor Blake?" The reception hall hummed with muted conversations as Marcus followed Dr. Evans through the entrance. The elegant space was filled with the university's elite, board members, distinguished faculty, and major donors, all dressed impeccably and mingling with practiced smiles. Those smiles faltered as Marcus entered. Conversations paused, eyebrows raised, and disapproving glances were exchanged. Marcus had never been in this building before, let alone at such a prestigious gathering. The message had always been clear: spaces like this weren't meant for students like him. "Dr. Evans," Dean Morrison said tightly, stepping slightly in front of Marcus, "let me introduce you to our board chairman. Mr. Johnson, perhaps you could wait by the refreshment table?" "Mr. Johnson stays with me," Dr. Evans replied firmly. "I find his perspective invaluable." Before Dean Morrison could respond, an elegant woman in a tailored suit approached them, her expression lighting up at the sight of Dr. Evans. "William. I thought that was you." She embraced Dr. Evans warmly before turning curious eyes toward Marcus. "And who is this young man?" "Dr. Eleanor Hayes," Dr. Evans said with genuine warmth. "Allow me to introduce Marcus Johnson, an economics student who has been kind enough to guide me around campus today." Dr. Hayes extended her hand to Marcus. "A pleasure, Mr. Johnson. Any friend of William's is a friend of mine." Dean Morrison interjected, "Mr. Johnson only just met Dr. Evans today, Eleanor." "He's not actually, yet he's shown more genuine courtesy than many long-standing colleagues," Dr. Evans interrupted smoothly. "Eleanor is the director of University Hospital, Marcus, and an old friend from our Harvard days." Marcus shook her hand, acutely aware of the growing attention they were attracting. "It's nice to meet you, Dr. Hayes." "Harvard days?" Professor Blake echoed, looking between Dr. Evans and Dr. Hayes with sudden intensity. "You were at Harvard together?" "Oh yes," Dr. Hayes replied. "William and I go back decades. Though he's remained loyal to Harvard while I wandered to other institutions." A murmur rippled through the nearby guests. Marcus noticed how several people who had been deliberately ignoring him now seemed to be reassessing, their expressions calculating as they observed his interaction with Dr. Evans. Dr. Hayes lowered her voice slightly. "William, the committee is eager to hear your preliminary thoughts. Your evaluation carries significant weight, especially regarding the proposed partnership." "Partnership? Evaluation?" Marcus began to realize that Dr. Evans wasn't just any visitor. The respectful deference, the nervous attention from administrators, Dr. Evans clearly held some position of influence that extended beyond a simple campus visit. Dean Morrison stepped closer, her voice honeyed with forced cordiality. "Dr. Evans, the president is eager to speak with you privately. Perhaps now would be a good time. Mr. Johnson surely has other commitments." "Actually," Dr. Evans replied, "Mr. Johnson's insights about campus culture have been most valuable to my evaluation. I'd like him to join us." The dean's smile tightened. "That would be highly irregular. These discussions involve sensitive matters regarding interinstitutional relations." "I assure you, Patricia," Dr. Hayes interjected, "William's judgment in these matters is impeccable. If he wants Mr. Johnson present, there must be a good reason." While they debated his presence, Marcus noticed Professor Blake whispering urgently to a colleague, her eyes darting repeatedly toward him. The pain in his back was intensifying from standing so long, but he maintained his composure, unwilling to show weakness in this environment. Dr. Evans seemed to notice his discomfort. "Before we meet with the president, I believe Mr. Johnson could use a moment to rest. His back injury has been causing him considerable pain." "Back injury?" Dr. Hayes inquired with professional interest. "Yes," Dr. Evans replied, his gaze fixing on Professor Blake. "An unfortunate incident involving a broken chair in Professor Blake's classroom, I understand. One that the administration has apparently dismissed as inconsequential." The silence that followed was profound. Dean Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to alarm as she looked between Professor Blake and Dr. Evans. "I'm not sure what Mr. Johnson has told you," Professor Blake began defensively, "but accidents happen in classrooms all the time." "Indeed they do," Dr. Evans agreed. "Though I find it curious how certain accidents seem to happen disproportionately to specific students." The tension in the room was palpable now. Marcus remained silent, watching as the power dynamics he'd always felt but could never prove were suddenly being exposed by this enigmatic elderly man. Dr. Hayes gestured toward a private alcove. "William, perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more appropriate. Mr. Johnson looks like he could use a seat, and I'd like to hear more about this injury." As they moved away from the stunned administrators, Marcus heard Dean Morrison hissing urgently to Professor Blake, "What exactly did you do? Do you have any idea who he is?" Though he couldn't hear Professor Blake's response, the panic in her eyes told Marcus that something significant was unfolding, something that might finally bring to light the discrimination he and others had faced in silence for so long. The university president's private conference room was oppressively silent as Dr. Evans finished recounting his observations from the day. Marcus sat uncomfortably in the plush leather chair, acutely aware of the tension radiating from Dean Morrison and Professor Blake, who were seated across the polished mahogany table. President Harrington, a typically imposing figure known for his fundraising prowess, looked uncharacteristically unsettled. "Dr. Evans, while I appreciate your concerns about Mr. Johnson's experience, I assure you that isolated incidents don't reflect our institution's values." "Isolated?" Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow. "In the mere hours I spent on your campus, purposefully appearing as a vulnerable elderly man, I witnessed systematic indifference, troubling security protocols that appear to target certain students and administrators who actively work to exclude rather than include. Would you call that isolated?" Dr. Hayes, who had insisted on joining them, leaned forward. William, perhaps you should clarify your role here for everyone present. I believe there's some confusion. Dr. Evans nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I suppose that would be helpful. He turned to address Marcus directly. Mr. Johnson, I owe you an explanation. I am not merely visiting your university for a casual evaluation. Professor Blake interjected nervously. Dr. Evans is a highly respected educational consultant whose recommendations are valued by institutions nationwide. We were honored to. Karen, Dr. Hayes interrupted gently, let him speak. Dr. Evans continued, his eyes still on Marcus. While I do occasionally consult for universities seeking to improve their practices, my primary role for the past 17 years has been as Dean of Admissions at Harvard University. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. President Harrington physically flinched, while Dean Morrison's face drained of color. Marcus blinked in surprise, suddenly understanding the deference and anxiety Dr. Evans's presence had inspired. Furthermore, Dr. Evans continued, I'm here specifically to evaluate the potential for a joint program between Harvard and this institution, a program that would create pathways for exceptional students to access both universities' resources. Professor Blake's nervous laugh broke the silence. Well, this is wonderful news. Our top students would certainly benefit from such an opportunity. That depends, Dr. Evans replied coolly, on whether your institution can demonstrate a genuine commitment to nurturing all students with potential, not just those who fit a particular profile or come from privileged backgrounds. He turned back to Marcus. When I arrived this morning, I deliberately presented myself as a confused elderly visitor, a small experiment I conduct at every institution I evaluate. Who stops to help? Who walks past? These small interactions reveal more about institutional culture than any polished presentation or carefully curated tour. President Harrington cleared his throat. Dr. Evans, while I understand your methodology, drawing broad conclusions from such limited interactions seems premature. Perhaps, Dr. Evans acknowledged. But Mr. Johnson's experience is hardly limited, is it? A professor deliberately placing him in a situation where injury was likely, then facing no consequences for that action? Administrative dismissal of a legitimate complaint. Regular security harassment. These speak to systemic issues, not isolated incidents. Dr. Hayes studied Marcus with newfound interest. May I ask about your academic standing, Mr. Johnson? 3.87 GPA, Marcus replied quietly. I'm on a partial merit scholarship. Despite Professor Blake's class? Dr. Evans inquired. I have an A- currently. It would be higher, but participation points are subjectively allocated. Professor Blake shifted uncomfortably. My grading criteria are completely objective and we can review your grading distribution by demographic later, Professor, Dr. Evans interrupted mildly. I find such data quite illuminating. The room fell silent again. Marcus felt strangely detached from the proceedings, as if watching a play unfold where he was both character and audience. The powerful people around this table had always existed in a different sphere, one where they made decisions about students like him without ever truly seeing them. Yet now, because of a simple act of kindness, those power dynamics were being questioned. Harvard's Dean of Admissions had seen him, truly seen him, when he was just another student with a backpack, navigating a campus that often felt designed to exclude him. Mr. Johnson, President Harrington addressed him directly for the first time, his tone carefully modulated, I want to personally assure you that we take these matters very seriously. If there have been oversights regarding your injury or academic experience, we will address them immediately. The sudden solicitousness was almost more uncomfortable than the previous indifference. Marcus understood its source, not genuine concern for his well-being, but fear of what Dr. Evans's evaluation might report back to Harvard. With respect, sir, Marcus replied, finding his voice, I filed a formal complaint 3 weeks ago. I've sent follow-up emails. I've visited the administration office twice. Each time, I was told the matter was under review. Nothing has changed. Dr. Evans nodded approvingly at Marcus's composed response. It seems, President Harrington, that your institution has some significant reflection to do regarding its commitment to equity and inclusion, not just in mission statements, but in daily practices. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. I'll be continuing my evaluation tomorrow, though with a slightly different approach now that my identity is known. In the meantime, I'd suggest you review Mr. Johnson's complaint with the urgency it deserved 3 weeks ago. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Evans turned to Marcus. Would you join me for dinner, Mr. Johnson? I believe we have more to discuss. In that moment, looking at the stunned faces of the university leadership, Marcus understood that his simple act of kindness had unexpectedly given voice to the experiences that he and others like him had long endured in silence. The restaurant Dr. Evans had chosen was several blocks from campus, an elegant yet understated establishment where the maitre d' greeted him by name despite his supposedly brief visit to the city. As they settled into a quiet corner booth, Marcus still felt as if he were moving through a dream. You must have questions, Dr. Evans said, after they had ordered. A few, Marcus admitted with a small smile. Starting with why Harvard's Dean of Admissions was wandering around our campus pretending to be lost. Dr. Evans chuckled. Not entirely pretending. I am somewhat directionally challenged, especially on unfamiliar campuses. But yes, the vulnerability was partly strategic. He took a sip of water before continuing. When evaluating potential institutional partnerships, I find traditional tours and official presentations nearly worthless. They show what administration wants me to see, not what students actually experience. So I developed my own methodology: arrive early, appear vulnerable, and observe who helps and who doesn't. And I was the only one who stopped, Marcus stated rather than asked. The only one, Dr. Evans confirmed. Out of dozens who passed by. Including your Dean of Student Services, which I found particularly telling. Their appetizers arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Once the server had departed, Dr. Evans continued, his expression more serious. What happened after you helped me was equally revealing. The security guard's immediate assumption that you were harassing rather than helping me. Professor Blake's transparent attempts to separate us. Dean Morrison's efforts to exclude you from spaces she deemed inappropriate for someone of your position. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. They were just protecting the university's image. Precisely, Dr. Evans agreed. But a truly great institution doesn't need protection from its students, it celebrates them, nurtures them, listens to them. What I witnessed today was an administration more concerned with appearances than substance. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me, if you don't mind, what happened with Professor Blake? The full story, not the abbreviated version. Marcus hesitated, then recounted the incident in detail, how Professor Blake had singled him out, forced him to move to a broken chair despite his polite objection, then dismissed the resulting injury as his own fault. How his formal complaint had disappeared into administrative limbo while he continued attending her class, enduring subtle but persistent academic penalties. Dr. Evans listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. And you've continued to excel despite this treatment? I don't really have a choice, Marcus replied. My scholarship depends on maintaining my GPA. My family depends on me finishing my degree. Dropping the class or transferring isn't an option. Resilience under unfair circumstances is admirable, Dr. Evans observed. But no student should have to be that resilient simply to receive an education they've earned. Their main courses arrived, and for a few minutes they ate in companionable silence. Marcus was still processing the day's events, how a simple act of kindness had unexpectedly connected him with someone who might actually have the power to address the systemic issues he'd faced. I imagine they're in quite a panic back on campus, Dr. Evans remarked, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. President Harrington has been pursuing this Harvard partnership for years. The potential prestige and fundraising opportunities are substantial. And now it might not happen because of what you saw today, Marcus realized aloud. Dr. Evans considered this. That depends entirely on how they respond. Institutions, like people, reveal their true character not when everything is going well, but when confronted with their failures. What happens next will tell me everything I need to know about whether this university deserves a partnership with Harvard. He set down his fork and looked directly at Marcus. But that's enough about institutional politics. I'm more interested in you, Mr. Johnson. Your career aspirations, your goals beyond graduation. As dinner continued, their conversation shifted to Marcus's academic interests, his research on economic development in underserved communities, and his long-term vision for creating more equitable financial systems. Dr. Evans listened attentively, occasionally asking incisive questions that pushed Marcus to articulate his ideas more precisely. You have a remarkable clarity of purpose, Dr. Evans observed as they finished dessert. And the intellectual rigor to match it. I don't say this lightly, but students with your combination of academic excellence and personal character are precisely who we seek at Harvard. Marcus blinked in surprise. Sir. Our graduate programs in economics and public policy are among the world's finest, Dr. Evans continued matter-of-factly. And based on what I've seen today, your potential is being significantly undervalued at your current institution. The implication hung in the air between them. Marcus struggled to find words. The possibility of Harvard, a dream so distant he'd never even allowed himself to consider it, suddenly presented as a realistic option. I couldn't possibly afford. Financial considerations should never prevent exceptional students from accessing exceptional education, Dr. Evans interrupted gently. That's a principle I've fought for throughout my career. As they left the restaurant, Dr. Evans handed Marcus his business card, heavy cardstock with embossed Harvard insignia. Tomorrow morning, I'll be meeting with President Harrington and the board to discuss my observations and recommendations regarding the potential partnership. I'd like you to attend. Me? Marcus asked, surprised. Why? Because, Dr. Evans said simply, the issues we're discussing directly affect students like you, yet those students are rarely invited to the table. It's time to change that, don't you think? As they shook hands, Marcus realized that his simple decision to help a seemingly lost elderly man had potentially altered the trajectory of his future, and perhaps the future of his university as well. The boardroom fell silent as Dr. Evans concluded his presentation. The PowerPoint slide displaying comparative data on student treatment, complaint resolution, and diversity metrics remained projected on the wall, a damning indictment of institutional failures disguised as colorful charts and graphs. Marcus sat near the end of the long table, acutely aware of the sidelong glances from board members and administrators. President Harrington's face had progressed through various shades of discomfort throughout the 30-minute presentation, while Dean Morrison studied her notepad with suspicious intensity. Thank you, Dr. Evans, for your thorough analysis, President Harrington finally said, his voice strained with forced pleasantness. I assure you, these findings don't reflect our institutional values or aspirations. Yet they reflect your institutional practices, Dr. Evans replied mildly. Which I've always found to be the more accurate measure of an organization's true values. An uncomfortable silence followed before Board Chairman Richardson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should address the specific incident involving Mr. Johnson before discussing broader implications. Professor Blake, would you care to explain the circumstances from your perspective? All eyes turned to Professor Blake, who had been uncharacteristically silent throughout the meeting. She straightened in her chair, composing her features into an expression of professional concern. I appreciate this opportunity to clarify what was clearly an unfortunate misunderstanding, she began. While I have no specific recollection of directing Mr. Johnson to a damaged chair, our classrooms are heavily used, and furniture sometimes deteriorates without faculty awareness. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though he noticed Dr. Evans watching him closely. As for Mr. Johnson's complaint, Professor Blake continued smoothly, I was never formally notified of its filing, or I would have addressed it immediately. My teaching philosophy has always centered on creating inclusive learning environments for all students, regardless of background. Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Yet your own grading distribution, which I've taken the liberty of analyzing, shows a statistically significant disparity in how you evaluate students from different demographic backgrounds. Would you care to explain that as well? Professor Blake's carefully constructed composure faltered. Those statistics can be misleading without proper context. Many factors influence academic performance. Indeed they do, Dr. Evans agreed. including whether a professor creates an environment where all students feel equally valued and supported. Dean Morrison interjected hastily, I think we can all agree that improvements can be made in our processes. Mr. Johnson, on behalf of the administration, I want to personally apologize for how your complaint was handled. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she continued, there was clearly a breakdown in communication. Your document must have been misrouted in our system. I assure you, had I been personally aware of your situation, would have intervened immediately. The insincerity was palpable. Marcus recognized the performance for what it was, damage control rather than genuine remorse. These weren't apologies for what had happened, they were apologies for getting caught. Mr. Johnson, President Harrington added, leaning forward with practiced earnestness, we value your contributions to our campus community. To demonstrate our commitment to making this right, I'm pleased to offer you a full scholarship for your remaining semesters, along with compensation for your medical expenses. The sudden generosity, offered only after Dr. Evans's involvement, highlighted how easily his valid complaints had been dismissed when he had no external leverage. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied carefully. But this isn't just about me. How many other students have filed complaints that were misrouted? How many others have been placed in uncomfortable or unsafe situations because of their background? A tense silence followed his questions. Board members exchanged glances, while administrators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A valid point, Dr. Evans acknowledged. Institutional change requires more than resolving isolated incidents or appeasing individual complainants. It requires honest self-assessment and systematic reform. He turned to the university president. My recommendation to Harvard regarding this potential partnership will depend largely on what concrete steps you propose to address these issues. Not just for Mr. Johnson, but for all students who may face similar treatment. President Harrington nodded eagerly. We're fully committed to comprehensive reform. In fact, I'm prepared to announce the formation of a special committee to review our policies and procedures regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Committees can be useful, Dr. Evans noted, though they often become mechanisms for delaying rather than implementing change. I'll be more interested in immediate, measurable actions. He glanced at his watch. I have a flight to catch this afternoon, but before I leave, I'd like a few moments alone with Mr. Johnson. Perhaps we could use your office, President Harrington. The request, phrased as a courtesy but delivered as a directive, prompted a quick nod from the president. As Marcus followed Dr. Evans out of the boardroom, he felt the weight of stares from those remaining behind. Professor Blake suddenly stood. Mr. Johnson, I just want to say again how truly sorry I am for any discomfort you experienced in my class. I hope we can move forward with a better understanding. The apology, clearly performed for Dr. Evans's benefit, lacked any acknowledgement of intentional wrongdoing. Marcus simply nodded in response, unwilling to publicly challenge her insincerity but equally unwilling to absolve her with false forgiveness. As the door closed behind them, Dr. Evans smiled slightly. Remarkable how quickly priorities can shift when sufficient leverage is applied, isn't it? Though I notice genuine remorse remains in short supply. For the first time that day, Marcus allowed himself a small smile in return. I wasn't expecting genuine remorse, sir. Just accountability. Well, Dr. Evans replied as they walked toward the president's office, I believe we're about to discuss a different kind of accountability altogether, one that might interest you considerably more. President Harrington's office, with its mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, and carefully curated memorabilia, seemed designed to impress visitors with its aura of academic gravitas. Once the door closed behind them, Dr. Evans gestured for Marcus to take a seat on one of the plush visitor chairs. I imagine this has been quite an overwhelming 24 hours for you, Dr. Evans observed, settling into the adjacent chair rather than behind the president's imposing desk. That's an understatement, Marcus admitted with a slight smile. Yesterday I was just trying to get through Professor Blake's class without aggravating my back. Today I'm sitting in the president's office with Harvard's Dean of Admissions. Life can change direction with remarkable speed sometimes, Dr. Evans agreed. Often because of small decisions that didn't seem significant at the time. Like choosing to help a lost old man when everyone else walked past. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a folder emblazoned with Harvard's crimson insignia. "I meant what I said last night, Mr. Johnson. Students with your combination of academic excellence and moral character are precisely who we seek at Harvard." Marcus stared at the folder, his heart suddenly racing. "Sir, Before you say anything," Dr. Evans interrupted gently, "I want to be absolutely clear. This isn't charity or a publicity gesture. Harvard's graduate programs accept only those with the intellectual capacity and personal qualities to excel there. Based on your academic record, your research interests, and what I've observed of your character under pressure, you are eminently qualified." He opened the folder and passed several documents to Marcus. "These are application materials for our graduate programs in economics and public policy. You'll note the upcoming deadline has been highlighted. Should you choose to apply, I would consider it a personal privilege to submit a letter of recommendation on your behalf." Marcus scanned the materials with a sense of disbelief. Harvard had always existed as an abstract concept, a place for people from different backgrounds, different circumstances than his. Yet here was a tangible pathway, being presented by someone with the authority to make it more than just a dream. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed, looking up from the papers. "You don't need to say anything right now," Dr. Evans assured him. "This is a significant decision, one that should be considered carefully. Discuss it with your mother. Research the programs. Determine if they align with your goals." He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "What I will say is this: your current university has failed you in important ways, despite your extraordinary efforts to succeed within their system. At Harvard, your talents would be nurtured rather than overlooked. Your perspective would be valued rather than marginalized." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions: hope, anxiety, disbelief, and a tentative excitement. Even if I applied and was accepted, the financial reality. Harvard has substantial resources dedicated to ensuring that qualified students can attend regardless of financial circumstances, Dr. Evans interrupted. "Should you be accepted, we would work with you to make it feasible." He sat back, his expression softening slightly. "I believe you mentioned your mother is completing a nursing degree while working 2 jobs. Her determination clearly runs in the family." "Everything I know about perseverance, I learned from her," Marcus acknowledged. "Then I suspect she would tell you that opportunities like this aren't to be dismissed out of fear or self-doubt," Dr. Evans observed. "Though the final decision, of course, must be yours." They were interrupted by a knock at the door. President Harrington's assistant announced that the board was ready to continue their discussion whenever Dr. Evans was available. "Tell them I'll rejoin shortly," Dr. Evans instructed, waiting until the door closed again before turning back to Marcus. "Before we conclude, there's something else I'd like you to consider." He paused, as if carefully weighing his next words. "Institutions change slowly, and often reluctantly. The commitments made today in that boardroom may or may not translate into meaningful improvements for students here. Much depends on continued pressure and accountability." Marcus nodded his understanding. The hasty promises and sudden solicitude from administrators who had previously ignored him seemed unlikely to survive Dr. Evans's departure. "Whatever you decide about Harvard," Dr. Evans continued, "I encourage you to maintain contact with me. Your insights about the campus climate, and whether genuine changes are implemented, would be valuable to my ongoing evaluation of this potential partnership." The implication was clear: Marcus had unexpectedly become a crucial link between his university and Harvard, with the power to influence not just his own future but potentially the direction of his institution. As they stood to leave, Dr. Evans extended his hand. 24 hours ago, you made a simple choice to help someone when everyone else walked past. That choice revealed your character in ways that impressive test scores and perfect essays never could. Remember that, Mr. Johnson, whatever you decide next." Marcus shook the offered hand, suddenly aware that he stood at a crossroads that would define not just his academic future, but his understanding of what was possible for someone like him in a world that had often seemed determined to limit his potential. 6 months later, Marcus stood on Harvard Yard's ancient paths, the autumn leaves crunching beneath his feet as he made his way toward Littore Center. The nervous excitement that had accompanied his first weeks as a graduate student had mellowed into a quieter confidence, though he still occasionally found himself wondering if it was all somehow a dream. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, "Proud of you every day. Remember who you are." Marcus smiled, typing back a quick response before slipping the phone into his pocket. His mother had finally completed her nursing degree, and with a stipend from his graduate fellowship helping to support them both, she had been able to reduce her work schedule to just one job. His back had finally healed properly too. The specialist that Dr. Evans had referred him to had identified issues that previous doctors had missed, and after proper treatment, Marcus could now walk the considerable distances between Harvard's buildings without the constant pain that had become so familiar. As he approached Litor's entrance, he spotted Dr. Evans chatting with a colleague on the steps. The older man broke into a warm smile upon seeing Marcus. "Mr. Johnson. Perfect timing. I was just telling Professor Abernathy about your excellent contribution to yesterday's seminar." The professor, one of Harvard's most distinguished economists, nodded in greeting. "Evans doesn't offer praise lightly. I look forward to reading your research proposal." After she continued into the building, Dr. Evans turned to Marcus. "How are you settling in? Any challenges I should know about?" "Nothing I can't handle," Marcus replied honestly. "Though I'm still adjusting to professors who actually want to hear my perspective rather than dismiss it." Dr. Evans chuckled. "A pleasant adjustment, I hope." "Definitely." Marcus hesitated before adding, "I received an interesting email from President Harrington yesterday. Apparently, they've implemented a new system for handling student complaints, with external oversight from an equity committee." "Is that so?" Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow. "I imagine our continued deliberations about the partnership have provided meaningful motivation for such reforms." The potential partnership between Harvard and Marcus's former university remained under evaluation, a state of limbo that Dr. Evans seemed in no hurry to resolve, particularly as reports from current students suggested that some promised changes had proved more cosmetic than substantial. "Professor Blake has taken a sabbatical," Marcus added. "Supposedly to work on research, but rumors suggest the university encouraged her temporary departure after several other students came forward with similar experiences." "Accountability often comes gradually," Dr. Evans observed. "But it does come, eventually." They began walking together toward the campus center, their conversation shifting to Marcus's upcoming research project. The sense of intellectual partnership, of being valued for his mind rather than judged for his appearance, still felt revolutionary after years of fighting for basic respect. "I've been meaning to ask," Marcus said as they walked, "why did you decide to approach me that day? You could have revealed your identity to anyone, a security guard, an administrator. Why trust a random student who happened to stop?" Dr. Evans considered the question thoughtfully. "In my experience, Mr. Johnson, how people treat others when there's no apparent benefit to themselves reveals more about their character than any resume or recommendation letter ever could. You helped because it was right, not because you expected anything in return." He smiled slightly. "Though I confess, I didn't anticipate quite how dramatically things would unfold." As they reached the campus center, they encountered a tour group of prospective students, diverse faces filled with the same mixture of hope and uncertainty that Marcus had felt during his own application process. Several looked his way with curious expressions, perhaps wondering about his own journey to Harvard. "Your presence here matters beyond your individual success," Dr. Evans remarked, following Marcus's gaze toward the tour group. "It changes perceptions of what's possible, who belongs in these spaces. That's a powerful legacy." Marcus nodded, thinking about the email he'd received that morning from Sophia, who was now applying to graduate programs herself, inspired by his example. One choice, one moment of kindness, had created ripples he couldn't have imagined. "The funny thing is," Marcus said as they prepared to part ways, "that day on campus, when everyone was ignoring you, I almost walked past too. My back was hurting, I was late for study group, and I kept thinking it wasn't my problem." "Yet you stopped," Dr. Evans reminded him. "And that has made all the difference, for both of us." As Marcus continued toward his next class, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from a painful existence at an institution that had never truly valued him to Harvard's hallowed halls. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had begun with a simple choice to see someone else's humanity when everyone around him had chosen indifference. Sometimes, he realized, the most powerful act of resistance against an unjust system was simply refusing to participate in its callousness, choosing instead to extend a hand to someone in need, even when there seemed to be no benefit in doing so. And sometimes, that choice changed everything. Dear friend, in a world where kindness is often seen as weakness and selfishness as strength, remember that true character reveals itself in how we treat those who can offer us nothing in return. This story reminds us that a single act of compassion can not only change lives but also challenge systems of inequality that persist because of our collective indifference. We each face daily choices to see, or ignore, the humanity in others. What world might we create if we all chose to stop and help? If this message touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the power of human connection and remind us that positive change begins with individual choices.